All right, so here's what we're going to do, guys. We're going to lull them into a false sense of security. And just when they start to relax, we're going to pull the rug right out from under the. Oh, hey, everyone. We're back with Billionaire Anders Murphy. Welcome back to the show, Anders. Good to have you here.
Nice to be back.
Thanks for taking time out of your day. I know you have a job now, but thanks for coming and talking to us. How are you doing, and what's been going on for you?
Yeah, good. A lot's been going on. I feel like, when was the last time I was on this podcast? April?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It is definitely longer than it feels, and we were talking about Game of Life, the demo, and I mean, while half the internet was down a couple of days ago because of AWS East going down, Blinksy and your demos, checkboxes, which I think are also running on Hetzner, were
Yep,
fine,
still
and the
fine.
Datastar website just fine running on Artistech. So yeah, I think like it would be great to talk about your demos, billion checkboxes and billion cells, because we've mentioned them on the show here. But I think you've been on this very interesting journey of discovery and have a lot of wisdom,
Delaney's already
experience.
shaking his head.
Yeah, for
To
those that
share with
are
us.
listening, my eyes are rolling in the back of my head as hard as they physically can. I love Anders, but my God.
Yeah, so I mean, I did Game of Life, and then the next big thing was a million checkboxes, which quickly became a billion checkboxes because there was an argument on Twitter that a million wasn't enough. Or no product. I think it was like, no product manager has ever asked me for a million checkboxes. And then it was like, you're right. They always ask me for a billion checkboxes. So if you don't know, there was a demo maybe a year or two ago by a guy called Nolan. And he did a million checkboxes, and it was like React. And he started with like a Redis server and some multiple Python nodes, and he was using a bitmap and WebSockets, and it was streaming. It was sending the whole state. I don't even know. It might not even have been WebSockets. I think it was just polling and sending the this state over the wire for the entire million. And there was 2 states per checkbox, on and off. And I this has kind of been like a benchmark for me whenever I like try a new thing that's like multiplayer. I'm like, oh, can I do this? Because it's deceptively hard. And I wanted to do it with virtualization, because that was something that I hadn't done with Game of Life. And it's like, if a data set's too big to render, too big to send over the wire, and we're using Datastar, we're not going to send the whole state like he did in that demo. We're going to just send the view, so virtual scroll, in 2 directions, with Brotli compression. And yeah, so put that together in about a week. The first version was very, 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 very naive. There were literally a million rows in a SQLite database, and then the next version of that was just a billion rows in a SQLite database. It turns out that's good enough. Delaney had told me like, oh, you should do chunking and compression and use all of these fancy indexes. But no, it was just, and it wasn't even smart. It wasn't even like sparse or like empty. It was, every row was created from day one, whether they were checked or not. And this was on a $5 Hetzner box, and got on Hacker News, and it was fine. And then over the last few months, like in my spare time, I've sort of been refining it a little bit and gradually working my way back to Delaney's sage advice. It's like, oh, chunking, that's really good, Delaney. It's like, yeah.
Well, what's funny is that you're already running it, and it's been on top of Hacker News, and it's done that, and like you kind of forgot the part of why you don't see million checkboxes as a demo anymore from the other people.
Well, that was the thing, right? It was like, I think he ended up doing it in Python, and to be fair, like it went super viral, and he got a ton of traffic, and all the script kiddies started going mad on it, and it started falling over and crashing. And I think you rewrote it in Go, but it was still, you're still talking about multiple nodes, and a separate Redis instance. Which was cool because I think he could actually like replay some of the stuff. like when he was doing the analysis later. Um, but it was basically expensive. It cost him like $800 for 2 weeks. And then he turned it off. So the goal was kind of like, okay, we probably won't get as much traffic as that, but like, does it work? And like, can you expose something like this to the internet and not have certain people on our Discord who will remain nameless write scripts against it and be fine, right? Because I think that was the main problem is for the original demo is it's like people just started hammering the server. And because it's polling and it's sending the whole state each time, and like every time a change happens, it was refreshing all the connected clients and sending the whole state to each client. Like it gets expensive from bandwidth and compute very quickly. So a fair bit of this was also like learning things about SQLite, like, oh, if we were already with checkboxes, not with checkboxes, with Game of Life, we were already doing like CQRS and pushing updates at like a set cadence, like in that sort of game loop mechanism. And then here it was like, okay, well, everyone's looking at a different view, so we can't have a shared cache. We have to go to disk. We have to have a database because it's too much to have in memory. I mean, technically, you could have it all in memory if you've got a big enough box, but the goal was to run it on like $5 to $10. Like that's the budget. And so the new element was kind of like batching all those changes. And by batching, I'm not saying like the later versions are a bit more advanced, but the big change was actually like all of your actions come in and they return a 2 or 4, and they put like the change in a queue, and the batch just wraps that in a single, like whatever's happened in 100 milliseconds in a single SQLite transaction. And just with that alone, you can suddenly handle, I think it was like with the tests I was doing, like 40,000, like it was like an update, a query, and an insert, and it was doing 40,000 of those a second. And you're like, okay, well, because originally that was the other thing. I was like, oh, I need to put in rate limiting. I put in some rate limiting stuff, and then that was crashing because it was running out of memory when I was doing the load testing. So it's like, I'm sure there's smarter ways of doing that, but it was just like, actually, if we just make it really fast, then the script kiddies can have their fun, and we don't have to worry about rate limiting. So so that went up. It went on Hacker News. It's been on the front page and various like links, sublinks to articles and stuff. And I think since it's been out, there's been about 20,000, just over 20,000 unique users who have clicked at least one checkbox. And then
wow.
Cells is like a similar version, which was like, again, there was a discussion on Discord. It's like, how do you handle like 100 form fields on a page? And it was like, actually, if we just have one signal and make it whatever the user's focused on, does that work? And it was basically like a reskin of checkboxes with cells. So it's like a giant spreadsheet. But effectively,
right, so
the same thing.
I remember the point that the checkboxes demo was not, you were not using Boolean values. You're actually like storing it in a database on disk. So in theory,
with
you
color
could
and stuff as well.
Right. Yes. Well, you
Oh yeah,
added
there was
color
8
later.
colors. Yeah, there was like 16 colors just to add, just to make
So the
it like.
fact that you can do that, it means that you're actually storing state, and then Cells kind of takes that a step further and says, well,
Whereas any ASCII, yeah.
you allow the user to enter any characters
Yeah,
into a cell, and that just gets stored in the database, probably in the same way or in
in the same
way.
format. I mean, later they had chunks, so it's like 16 by 16 chunks, and that was just so it could be a little bit smaller on disk, so I didn't have to pay for bigger boxes if someone went around and like decided to put like really big ASCII characters or whatever in. I was like, I wanted some peace of mind, and let's play around with chunking because Delaney recommended that. Then yeah, and that was like, again, it just got smaller. And I think the later versions, I've made some of them where it's using another great recommendation, data-oriented design. So you're only representing what you have. So the chunks that are stored in the database are only chunks that are not zeroed. And that just means you can have everything in memory indexes if you want. But I wanted to do it the dumb way just to see if it would actually work if someone came along and checked every box type thing.
Let
Uh,
me just go back to the batching thing and the rate not rate limiting, because I find that fascinating, that approach. Uh, so you're not rate limiting so that you can queue up the writes, and then by batching the reads, it means every 100 milliseconds at the most, or at least, is how much people are going to wait. So it's not real time to the millisecond; it's real time to the 100 milliseconds or up to it.
yeah, it gives you granularity, but in practice, it will be faster because if you don't do that, you'll get more latency. And you can set it like 100 milliseconds was kind of
Mhm.
arbitrary. Like it can like it, the I think it's like even with like 100 or 200 concurrent users, it will still do uh, sub 50 milliseconds updates for all those connected users. But it was just like, let's just put a number in here. You know, if I was building like a CRUD app and it wasn't as like interactive, what would be the limits? So 100 milliseconds. I mean, you can make it lower. The thing is, though, is there's a latency aspect, which is like if you're like 200 milliseconds ping away, does it make sense for me to send every 100 milliseconds? I mean, yes, if I'm doing animations and it's like each update is multiple frames, but if each update is like a single frame and the updates are being batched at that rate, um,
Yeah. Well, you do want to pick. So because you're using CQRS, when I take an unchecked box and I check it, it doesn't get checked immediately. It actually sends a command up to the server. And when I get that response, that's when the checkbox actually gets. So you want to still make that feel as real time as possible, or you don't want to
yeah.
make
So
it
so for me, like
laggy.
that you're always going to have that lag. So I just do a pop animation on the client and do on mouse down, so the user gets
Right.
immediate feedback, and then it's kind of like the color comes in at the just halfway through the animation or at the end of the animation. Um, and
And that
and
animation is
unless
like 200 or 300 milliseconds, I think.
yeah, so it's like and that tricks your brain more than
Right.
enough. Um, like to the point where I've done like tests where I stick myself in like New York and it's just like, yeah, this still feels instant on like bad enough connection. Like that it will feel laggy on bad enough connection mainly because of your up limitations.
Mm-hmm.
And that is taking longer for your message to sometimes when you're on 3G, you don't actually you have okay down, but you don't have good up. Um, so
But some of that comes down to just being collaborative in general. Like if
yeah.
you're gonna do stuff with other people, like yes, you have a connection that does things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the joke here was like, I also wanted to be like, your checks are safe, right? Like, if you see it's checked, it has been written to a database, which is also incidentally backed up
Mm.
by Lightstream, just in case, which is like a to the second SQLite replication tool. So,
So, if I'm looking at one part of the board and you're looking at a different part of the board, obviously we're going to get different updates. So, how are those? Like, how do you coordinate those, or how do you determine who gets to see
I
what
mean,
and when?
I'm basically super naive. Like originally it was like I was thinking about doing like signals on the back end, fine grain updates. But with this sort of app, it's like, hang on, there's chances are most users are going to be updating. Like if I've added an account, which is the total number of connected users, like Game of Life, it's like every time something happened, everyone would update anyway. So it's like, what if I just update everyone who's connected? And
Mm-hmm.
you can do like caching, like if there was an expensive query or render sharing, which like Game of Life does. Um, but is that good enough? And also, what happens? Like again, building for Hack and Use, it's like what happens. I don't care about what the middle range is. I care about the extremes. Like if I've got 100 people or 1,000 people looking at the same segment of the screen, then doing all the diffing, doing all of the fine grain updates, all of that is just overhead. Um,
Yeah.
and it's also it's more complicated. You have to be like, oh, who do I update? Which queries want to be refreshed at which point? And it's kind of like a lot of this is the same with the batching and all of that stuff. It's just like make it really fast and make it really simple. Um, the same with the compression. It's like send the whole thing, and if that wasn't good enough, maybe we go into fancy like diffing territory. But as usual with Datastar, it's like no, it's good enough.
Well, even when you're talking about like, what if you're looking at two different areas of the screen? The one thing to be aware of is that he knows what area you're looking at and basically what chunks are visible in that section. So I think you were doing it where you basically subscribe to those chunks or to that view. Like that's different than the other person's view. So
Yeah, so,
like, I think that's what he's more talking about.
yeah, so the views will be different chunks. So basically, when someone checks a box anywhere, or in this case, actually, whenever anyone even scrolls, because the scroll events are going to the database. Because I was like, oh, I should use an in-memory cache. It's like, no, just stick it in the database. If it's a problem, I can fix it later. It's like, again, I was like, oh, maybe I'll have a database for user per user, or to reduce contention. It turns out if you're batching, it's fine. Like even if you're sending scroll events, it's fine. Like you can hit such high because of the batching and the CQRS, you can hit such high write rates with SQLite. That's like, okay, maybe it falls over at 80,000 writes, but like that's a nice problem to have. So what it does is when that happens, when any change happens, including the user scrolling, anything in the database, when anything gets inserted into the database, all connected users rerun all of their queries. And if the last event ID, which is what's sent down via SSE, and this is just like a bandwidth saving hack, will be the hash of the last view. So if we do that query, and you can move this further up the stack, and I'll explain that in a minute, but if we do that query and we build that HTML and it's the same as the hash that we know the last event ID is, we just don't bother sending. What gets interesting with that is, in theory, you could move that hash check further up. So you could be like, when you run the query, if the data from that query hasn't changed, don't bother building the HTML and stuff like that. And the reason why that was interesting to me is it's a lot simpler than doing like fine grain updates. It's kind of like if our queries are fast because it's SQLite, and you don't even need that check. Like there's an argument for the Brotli compression is so good because it's the exact same frame. But yeah, so effectively every update will update everyone. All connected users will requery. But again, because you're doing batches, it's like that SQLite cache is going to be really, really good for all those reads because you're not interleaving reads and writes for this. And yeah, the whole thing was just a question of like, do something that's simple and not too clever, and then if that's good enough, spend the cycle somewhere else.
Yeah, it's been funny seeing you go through the process because, like, I think I said this has to be archeries and it has to do this and it has to do slippy tiles and all this stuff, and you're like, YOLO, I'm just going to do it this way.
I mean, I did a version with archeries, and it was great, but it was like the query times were like twice as fast for the actual finding the items, but it was pulling the chunks out of storage and doing the building was like the overhead. Like, so it was like, okay, we're saving like some microseconds here, but like it's the classic it's not worth it. Though I think you could do like some really cool stuff with archeries, like doing like a giant canvas.
Yeah,
or like,
it would make it'll make a lot more sense if you ever do the scrolling or the zoom out, zoom in stuff. Then it will make a big difference.
Because then I totally get that now because you can do the quantizing.
Yeah,
straight away. Yeah, so it is definitely on my list.
But you have to do the slippy tiles first before it's worth it, kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
So let me summarize or try to summarize like your architecture in general. You're using SQLite, which is writing to disk. You said you have you're storing stuff in memory too.
No, so SQLite basically will cache pages, and you can make it cache pages in memory. So I'm not like there were versions where I was like, oh, I'll do something in memory, have an in-memory cache. It's like, no, SQLite is good enough. It's smart enough. It's on disk. It'll do it for me, and I just don't think about it. And that's why I even put like the user scroll position into SQLite. Like it's just fast.
So yeah, Ben, basically one of the things is even though SQLite is built like as a persistent store with serialization and all that stuff, because it's really smart about how it does its page management, especially if you don't use the defaults, because the defaults are built for like phones and stuff. If you set the amount of you can set the amount of pages you keep in memory to like 40, 60,000 of them, and they're 4K blocks. Now all of a sudden, most of the time it feels like it's an in-memory database. In fact, most of the stuff I've worked on in the past, there's like maybe between 2 and up to, at the very high end, 10% like change from going in memory to like on disk. And it's like, I just don't need a cache anymore if that's what the numbers are. It just simplifies life so much for most things. It's just, it feels like cheating to some degree. It really does.
And that's what the Rails people have started doing as well. They've like moved like solid queue, solid cache, all of that stuff it used to be Redis, but now it's SQLite because it's just so fast.
Okay, so that takes care of your memory and your persistence. Then you're using Brotli, and you wrote an article about Brotli and how effective it is. That's okay.
Yeah.
So I'll refer to that. So that's a big part of what you're doing too, right? So you, rather than having to be smart about that, you're allowing the web server, I assume, to do the compression, and then the browser to just uncompress it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like you're still not doing the diffing. You're still sending down the whole view, and you get to this weird space where it's like, at the beginning, I would care about how much stuff I'm sending down. I'd like make the ID shorter and everything, and you're just like, nah, it's fine. It's like I can have long class names. Brotli will just dedupe it. Fine.
I mean, it's weird because Brotli's now become your React VDOM, basically.
Yeah. And what's even more interesting with the checkboxes is you can go for a bigger window. Like I've actually played with like the max size windows, and then it's like that it goes up to 16 megabytes per connection. But it also means like when that user just scrolls in a massive space, it's remembering most of the frames. So it's like it compresses really good. And again, this is the thing, is like it's about keeping that single packet per update, because that's what makes the difference when you're not so much if you're like 50 milliseconds away, but if you're 150 milliseconds away, sending less and making sure it arrives makes a big difference.
Well, for anyone hasn't been listening or hasn't read the articles that Anders wrote and stuff, it's hard to get, because when you talk about compression, like if you talk about a normal gzip of some JSON or something, you're looking at probably at best like a 4-to-1 compression for most things. And going with the Datastar approach and what we're doing with keeping open streams, you're talking hundreds of times.
I mean, the checkbox demo stuff can hit like 9,000 to 1, right? Because there's in some contexts there's a ton of duplicated stuff in the window. Because each check, it's like all the classes. There's the bits that are changing are like, is it checked and the color. But the rest is mostly the same. And if you scroll in the context window that you've already been in, well, it's just going to be like, yeah, well, the last frame, just do that, right? You'll be sending like 13 bytes over, like a single check is 13 bytes if that view is in the context window. So if you just sit there checking a box in a loop, you could actually pump the numbers as high as you want, really.
Right. I mean, that was really visible with Game of Life, right? Where like things blink back and forth, and it's just the same thing going back and forth, and essentially nothing is coming down the wire, but the thing is still animating.
Yeah.
So it's incredible that Brotli like is giving all of that to you essentially for free, and then Datastar's morph strategy is taking care of the rest and doing the diffing for you too. So that's, I guess, the last piece where you think like, okay, just send everything down and let Datastar figure out the rest.
There's definitely points where you can hit like, especially, so I did initially the view was more constrained, and then the view got bigger on checkboxes, and now it sort of adapts. So it's like, depending on your device size, it will like send more or less data. And now it's like, if you zoom out or have a large screen, you'll see 3x3 chunks, but it's actually sending down 7x7 because it's buffering on both sides. So that is about 15,000 divs. And when you start entering that territory, depending on your device, like the browser is doing a bit more work. It's still like it can be like the whole, and most of that is actually like layout and CSS. And Morph actually helps you there. So you can hit like, it could be like 60 milliseconds for it to do its whole thing. But if you start comparing that to something like AG Grid or whatever, that's constantly got JavaScript thrashing. Whereas here it's like when the frame comes in, you do a tiny bit of JavaScript, which is like the morph, which is the smallest part of it, and then it's like layout and like moving divs around and all of that stuff, and then you're done. Um, and that's mostly like C++ code. And there's definitely tricks you can get into. Like you can morph is quite nice in the sense that you can actually get quite clever if you want and need to, and that's really only at the sort of like 15,000, 20,000 divs. And really,
But
it's
that's a
like,
limitation in the browser more than
yeah,
data start.
yeah,
Like it's
yeah.
actually
It's the browser just being like, yeah. It's not. So it's not. You at that point you're using morph to try and trick the browser into doing less, rather than trying to get around what morph is doing.
Right. From what I remember, you're putting an ID on each div that surrounds a checkbox, or maybe the div is the checkbox, and in that way, the morphing strategy is just replacing that bit of DOM, which means that ultimately the browser has very little work to do, or as little as possible, based
Yeah,
on
so
what's
that
changed.
there's a trade off where some things you want to do there's like chunks that come back that have divs. Like if you put an ID on every div, um, morph to some extent has to do a fair bit of work. And what you really want to preserve in this case, because a lot of it's using grids. In fact, like shout out to CSS grid and subgrid, because that's literally the magic behind all of this stuff. Um,
Hmm.
is you don't want to be recalculating the layout.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where morph is actually better than replace. If you replace the whole page, it's like, oh, I'm having to do the layout for 20,000 divs, and I'm having to calculate this grid, and the browser's faster doing it, but it's much faster if you don't do that. So there is some nuance there about like where you want to use morph to preserve layout, and where you want to effectively use replace because it will be faster than like working out what's changed. But again, this is not like it's an obscene amount of divs. It's like, as Delaney says, it's like a rendering test. It's not like a practical.
Right.
Um,
And then the other important piece is that, as far as I know, you only have a single event listener, which is essentially listening for a click on any of those divs, which
yeah,
are checkboxes,
I,
and it's
I
just on the parent.
yeah, I don't know how. The nice thing with that is it lets you do things like you can do data star ignore morph, like these weird hacks that don't, like, maybe they save you 10 milliseconds on like an 80 millisecond render, or um, and it because you like these components, data star doesn't have to care about, because the on click listener in the parent will read the ID from it and do stuff, and I'm not attaching data star stuff to it. But again, that's more like fine grained noodling. Like you don't have to do any of this stuff. The same with the top level stuff. Yeah, you have one event listener rather than 20,000 event listeners, right? It's the other thing with CSS is you can do like CSS ignore pointer events. I can't remember the exact incantation. So it's very easy with CSS to be like, none of this stuff is clickable, and then on the child be like, this thing is clickable, and then have a parent listener. I think some people have tried like just having a single event listener effectively for everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I thought that's what you were doing,
I
and
think,
the events just bubble up.
yeah, the events bubble up, and I mean, there's only really two event. It's one event listener, and there's two types of events. There's like if someone's tapped on like a palette, or if someone's tapped on a
Right.
checkbox, and each
Right.
item has like what endpoint it should call and the data it should call it with.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's sort of what I was playing around with. Some people have taken that like way further. Um,
Yeah, I think the pattern that you're using here, though, is very interesting to people, because people's first thought might be that you use a signal per checkbox, and then you
data on
add,
click or data on mouse
right,
down for every single
and
one.
then an event listener per checkbox. And you've actually said, no, we're not even using signals. You've just
yeah,
used, I think you've used an ID for the morphing strategy, and then
yeah,
data dash ID
yeah.
to give each checkbox
Yeah,
a unique identifier.
so that's a really good point. Is it's like the way I've sort of like internalized it is like ID is like for managing morph. Like if you want to do shenanigans with morph, or give like morph hints for performance, or and when I say morph, it's like avoiding layout shift, avoiding calculating CSS. Like again, but Johnny's done a fantastic job with Morph. It's really, really fast. And then data-ID is like information that this component wants to send back to the server, whether it's like, which thing was clicked. And that's really nice, because you can just have one handler.
Right, and all that event handler does is when a click event or mouse down event is bubbled up, it'll check what the data ID
Yeah,
value is on the element that was clicked and sends that up to the server. So it's
yes.
not
So
even sending a signal up; it's just sending
no, and
that
actually, I
ID.
think the current version of checkboxes has got a data action as well, which is the URL that you should hit. Um, which again, with Brotli, that stuff all compresses out, so you can have that. These data attributes, it's like, yes, it's expensive to add an event listener to 20,000 things, but it's not really expensive to have some extra data attributes that don't do anything, that are just data, right? And it's not expensive from a compression perspective because it just
They're
gets
just
compressed out.
strings, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And they're all the same, right? Like if all the checkboxes are hitting the same action, that URL is going to be the same. And like the only thing that's different is the ID, the data ID. And yeah, like I said, some people have done that, like taken that to more extremes where they'll do that on everything. It's like an action and then data params, and that's like the parameters that you want to pass into that endpoint. Other people have done like at work, we've got a system where it's we basically, the connection has a context, and like we create endpoints, or no, kind of not endpoints. It's more of like a request, and then there's like a map, and that will be effectively like an endpoint that's custom for that user for that button, where you can't pass in parameters. The parameters are like preordained in this context, and that's just to lock down what users can do. It's
You mean
like
hypermedia?
yeah. Yeah. But hypermedia, it's like not even like this is a URL and you pass the parameters. It's like this is a URL and this URL does one thing for this user and it's
No,
temporarily exists.
that's
Yeah,
the whole idea of hypermedia is that
yeah.
like you don't make it so that they can make
Do any?
changes
Yeah,
on the front end. Like they get
exactly.
a
And
preordained button.
suddenly you don't have to do validation, right? Because like rather, that in checkboxes you can script it because you can change the ID that you pass to this endpoint, right? But if each checkbox had like a hash that is unguessable, that is to check that checkbox
At
for
that
this
time.
user at this time, and could be invalidated at any time because of like security constraints. Someone's logged out, their permissions have changed. You can really lock down stuff, and you don't have to do all this validation on the back end, because the
Mm.
validation happened when you returned the view with that new URL.
There's one thing that I wanted to make sure people, because I forget that we have lots of people that listen that may not be web developer. They may be like, "Hey, I do back end stuff, but I like don't do a lot of front end stuff." To be clear, the whole like bubbling up and only having one, like listening to 20,000 checkboxes, but really only having one on click is something that's just built into the browser. It's not like Datastar is doing some magic. And I think people really almost rely on things like React to make things feel magical. It's like this is built
Yeah,
in the browser and it's really fast. So all we do is like you just know that this is in the browser. I just think sometimes people forget that this
yeah.
is not
I
a
mean,
Datastar
I
thing.
forgotten
This is just being better.
it was someone
Yeah.
mentioned it like in the Discord, being like, "Hey, you've got bubble up events." I was like, I forgot they existed because React, you don't use them, and it's fast. like, um,
And native events bubble up by default, so you don't even need a
yeah,
setting or anything. It's just
yeah, and it
it's
just works.
built
And
into
like
the browser
when
by
you
default. Yeah.
in like a chunk or a parent item, you just say ignore events, and then you don't get events for that, and then you just put the events all or pointer events all on the things that you want to be clickable, and you're done.
And then the last thing I want to point out about your demo as well is that you're not even using an SDK. And as far as I know, you're only using patch elements. That's the only
Yeah,
thing that
there's
the
just
server
patch
is sending
elements,
down to
and
the browser.
it's not even patch elements. It's patch elements with replace. No, patch elements with morph, and then I've got a patch elements with append, and that is just for running scripts that will remove themselves. because there was a few things I didn't want to enable arbitrary scripts, and I also wanted them to be kind of expressions when I was running JavaScript. I don't actually even use this. I think I used it like once for like the QR code copy something or other. But yeah, you can just use morph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he forgets that there's three functions that you have to implement. And he's like, no, there's only one in Datastar. I'm like, no,
Well,
there's
because if
more
you want
than
to
one.
patch signals, you just send down some data with some signals.
That's not as
That's
efficient
a
as other
HTML, right?
people. Yeah, that's not like there's efficient ways to do this, and Anders is very much about just YOLO, like
Extreme
let Datastar
minimalism.
handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, do the least amount of work and let things like SQLite, Brotli, and Datastar do the hard work. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty smart,
yeah.
if you ask me.
Well, we're both minimalists, just in different ways.
You mentioned work and job. Um, I want to ask you about this because for a long time, while you were making these demos, you were in between jobs, and I think that's one of the reasons you had a lot of time to dedicate to this, which is great. Um, you did get a job. What happened there, and how did that
Yeah.
come about?
For context, last year I wound down a startup, and then this is how I got into Datastar. I was actually looking at like Turbo because I was like, oh, I don't have a team anymore. I don't want to do React end closure on the back end. I don't have the capacity for that. Looked at Turbo, which is like the Rails version of HTMX, and then found Datastar, and then was like, oh, I need to put some time into this because this is the
And he was
right
trying to
way.
push state. He's trying to push history.
Yeah, our history
That's
stuff. Yeah,
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 that's the worst.
yeah. And then, so I was doing the demos and I was doing some prototypes, and I was like working out if I want to do another startup or not. Um, and then I put out the checkboxes demo and the cell demos. I've been like writing blogs and stuff, and in the closure community. And I was like, right, I'm gonna start looking again. I think I'll just get a closure job. And these really awesome, smart people from a company called Lightweight Ledger approached me, and they were like, "Oh well, we're building a giant spreadsheet," and we've been playing around with Daystar. We did the whole sync model. We did, like there's this great talk by Tonsky called like the Web After Tomorrow, which is all about like syncing between your backend and your client, and effectively having a database on the client. And conceptually, it's really cool. But the problem is, you will run into if in this case it's accounting software, you will run into problems where it's like, oh, this account has 200,000 transactions. It's like, now to load that data set in memory on the client, you're running a lot of JavaScript and you're syncing a lot of data, and then you have this whole sync system. And there's another product in that space, which is like an AG grid type thing that does immediate mode over the network, but they do it with Canvas. And they were like, oh, yeah, immediate mode. But if we could do immediate mode with hypermedia, because Canvas is really, really hard. Well, not hard, but it's like a lot of work, right?
Well, it's just a completely different thing. Like
Yeah,
you're doing a different
yeah.
thing.
You're building the entirety of the web UI. Like it's kind of like how Flutter does it. And then Apple changes to Glass or whatever, and you have to do it all again. So, so they approached me, and now I'm working for them. And yeah, it's loads of fun because everyone online on Twitter and stuff, they're like, oh yeah, but Datastar, what about building a Jira clone and stuff? And it's like, we're basically building AG Grid for like accounting software. So it's about as like rich as it's like the crucible of UI design, honestly. So that's really fun because we're using Datastar and Closure and Datomic and doing projections, which is another thing that's talked about a fair bit in the Datastar community. And so far, so good.
What?
Like it's just
I've gotten to see some sneak peeks of what they've been working on, and like I can't wait for there to be some talks and stuff about this stuff because it's gonna shut some people up, I guarantee, because it is the most efficient thing I've seen in that space for dealing with big things quickly. Like
I mean that's the
it's a
thing.
very
It's like
interesting problem.
if you virtualize the view of a large data set, then the client is just doing less work. Like I was working on something and we were like expanding like sub rows on a grid, and suddenly it's like you go from like 200 rows which you think you're rendering to like 7,000 rows, uh, and then the browser just chugs. But like you can just truncate that. You're like, hang on, well we're only showing the user 200, so now that we've got more data, we just throw that data away and don't send it to the browser. There's loads of clever stuff you can do around that, which is just really nice because you can always go back to the part that you're just rendering what the user is looking at. Um,
I just have to point out, I love the irony of in the early days somebody telling you, no client has ever asked me to make them 1 million checkboxes,
yeah,
and then you literally get a job out of those demos and now you're building databases for
yeah.
accounting software using Datastar. It's
Well,
Well, that's.
fantastic.
I mean, it's
it's
silly to some degree that people don't realize. I it's funny because we've had some like back and forth with people on Twitter, both Anders and I, about this stuff, and it's crazy how myopic people can be in that they don't see that it is a rendering demo trying to understand the core underlying tech so that you can build whatever you need to build on top of. Like, you want to know what the limits are of what you're building, and it's so weird how many people are actually like how many front end people are actually glue developers. Like, they don't actually understand the underlying tech and seeing, oh, this is doing 1,000 to 1. I should be paying some attention to this, because the irony is that you could do this in React, you could do it in other things,
yeah,
but the amount of overhead that you have, it just will not compare to being. It's interesting to see that those interactions. And the bad part in some ways is that stupid Anders and his stupid like doing things inefficiently and it's still being fast means that other people are going to come in and do like
yeah,
inefficient things and it still be fast enough, and we will have more people like once it gets more popular with the stuff he's doing and starting to do talks and stuff, we're getting an influx of people doing it wrong
yeah.
on purpose.
I mean, there's an element of like, it's like the balance between like the developer experience, even though I hate that term, and like performance. And it's like if immediate mode sending the whole thing broccoli compression means you can spend time solving the actual problem, which is building the product, then that's where you want to be. It's like, yeah, you can do checkboxes with SVG. Although interestingly, SVG checkboxes are actually slower to render than CSS checkboxes. The fun things you learn. You could do an SVG and it would be better, but like that's now a tailored solution to this problem. Whereas what you're really testing is like how many components, arbitrary components, can I render and then virtualize? Um, because yeah, in practice, you're not building 1 billion checkboxes.
Yeah, somebody did ask in Discord, if you had 90 seconds to pitch Datastar, what would you show? And it was interesting because I was saying, things like demos like checkboxes and Blinksy drawing on checkboxes, which we can talk about in a
Yeah,
moment.
I'm looking forward to that.
And then other people were saying, oh, I would show the live search on there's a craft demo site, and it just shows live search with the code next to it and the signals, which is very much a kind of cruddy type of, based on everything we've seen, kind of like the basic use case for Datastar, although a very common one and a very practical one. But they're kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum in what you can do in terms of what you can do with Datastar and in what way you can use it. But it is interesting that, yeah, I think for some people that seems like it's going to just fly over their heads and they're not going to get what's going on. But as soon as you start digging deeper, I think that's where you start to see, how powerful this real-time multiplayer approach is.
Yeah, it's
But
a tough.
it does, yeah, it does involve peeling back a couple of layers to actually like
It's a tough
see.
one because I remember with Delaney's original demos, which are even more impressive, with like the city, and then there's the one where it's like multiplayer drone game, and it's like the problem with those is like the minute a web developer sees a game, they're like, oh, well, this is game
100,000
dev.
updates a
Game
minute.
dev
Yeah.
is magical. It's just magic. Game dev's just magic. So it's like it's not like, but I have to deal with HTML, right? Um, and that's I try to get a bit closer with like the dumb demos of being like, this is still web dev, but we're doing kind of game stuff. But I do think it's like the search example like is is probably more appealing. But the thing is, you will miss stuff like CQRS and like the compression and all of that sort of stuff. And you will have the same problem that I have with every app I built, which is like you'll build a certain way and then you'll get to the point where you want real time and multiplayer. And now you have to sort of like rethink everything, or have two systems. So it's
Anders on probably a weekly basis when we're talking about like checkboxes or something going on, he'll bring up the Gladiator quote, which is the funniest thing.
Oh yeah. I wasn't the best because I killed quickly. I was the best because the crowd loved me. There we go.
Yeah, there you are.
But that's where like your talks, Ben, like Blinksy and all that sort of stuff. It's like if you can make it more relatable to whichever audience. But the problem is they are so good at doing so many things. It's almost like you have to tailor to the audience, right?
It's like in 90 seconds, it's difficult to know what to show people, but the general format of my conference talk was show them Blinksy, let them play with it, let them see that everyone in the audience is controlling what's up on my screen. So like show them a very quick demo where they can play and see instant reactivity, and then pull it back and say, okay, well, but we can also build it up to that, right? Going through the cruddy apps and the real-time kind of signals on the front end.
Speaking of Blinksy.
Okay. Speaking of Blinksy, so last time we were on, I just kind of done this, but now it's like it's been up for a couple of weeks. I think it's maybe 2 weeks or a bit more. So Blinksy is still now syncing over to part of checkboxes, right? Because I thought this was just fun in the beginning, but I'm like, Blinksy is a tiny canvas. It's 13 by 13 grid. Checkboxes is 1 million, so it's like 31,000
a billion
squared.
A billion.
Just
did I say
a few orders of magnitude off?
Then you have to start caring about the other 3 zeros.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I have this massive canvas, and like the majority of it is empty, right? So why don't I just draw on that and have Blinksy draw on that? And I had gone on my own little adventure with rate limiting because I wanted it to be as real time as possible. So rather than do batching, which is what you're doing, which makes total sense in your use case, I wanted it to be as real time as possible. But as soon as I put it out there and people were sending their scripts to it, it was having a hard time. So I took the opposite approach to you. I actually implemented rate limiting
per user.
But everything per user, per IP address. Yeah. But there's no batching. So the updates are as real time as they can possibly be. And then, I kind of hijacked part of your board, checkboxes at section, what is it? Chunk 1313 times 1313. And, whatever you do on Blinksy is mirrored over on checkboxes. And every night I kind of scrub that part of the board clean and then redraw it, because the sync is like unidirectional. It's only going from Blinksy up to checkboxes and not the other way around. So that was a fun little experiment. And since Andy G, I have written down my notes, Gayton is his name, who created CrossStream, his kind of event stream driven platform, is also now able to toggle checkboxes arbitrarily anywhere on the board as well. So there's like these cross-pollination of demos, which I think is so cool.
The irony is that it's like this demo is built on this demo, is built on this demo, built on this demo, which is a single SQLite server that's get backed up to S3. Like the entire internet will slowly become like put onto checkboxes as a bit store.
It's a checkbox blockchain.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, you have 16 bits per thing, and you have a billion. So you have 16 billion bits. So that's like 4 gigs worth of data. So like we can put like what I think I'm going to do when I have time is I'm going to put I'm going to actually encode the entire B movie as an MP4 into the checkbox and actually send it up as like an encoded the B movie, the entire thing. I think that's what my project is. So I haven't got. You want me to keep working on Stellar and Rocket because you do not want me to get involved with checkbox battles.
No, I
Because
Oh,
don't.
that's so cool. So, like, you could do it live, right? At this time,
no, I
go to
literally would
this
just be
part of the board.
yeah, no, I literally
And
well no, I'm saying that like actually encode the MP4 of the B movie, like do FF mod and basically stream in the movie and then be writing out to the checkboxes like as an ETL job.
And then as a result, in S3, because Lightstream is just writing the write ahead log, you will be able to scrub that write ahead log.
Yep. And like actually watch the B movie from the
Yeah.
wall. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's
100%.
still on my list is like to make it more event sourcey and like actually be
Yeah.
able to see the changes. Um,
Yeah, there's definitely some issues if you go event sourcey with this because
yeah,
like you're not doing deduplication of
all
blocks
of
and
that
stuff like
stuff.
that.
Yeah,
So
I
yeah,
was just like,
that's more
not
stuff that you
today.
won't listen to me
Yeah,
about. So
yeah. No. I think the next thing is definitely going to be more R index heavy.
I do
Just
find
to
it funny that Anders says, "Hey, so what can I do?" And I tell him all these ideas, and he goes, "Yeah, okay, cool. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to do the dumbest thing possible. Bye." Like it happens every few weeks. He's like,
yeah,
"Hey, I have an idea." Like, well, yeah, I told you about this like 6 months ago. So it's
yeah.
pretty funny.
I have to learn by doing, and it's been a journey. Like there's so much. Like you would think like just maybe a good note is you think you can't learn that much by building something really stupid. I have learned so much, like so much about CSS grid, so much about like CQRS, about like the Java threading model, all of this stuff that's like
mm,
weird. Like I wrote the part of this, I ended up writing my own SQLite driver because I wasn't happy with the standard one that like
Well, and you hadn't
uses
even really used SQLite in Anger before this project,
yeah,
if I
so
remember
like,
right.
I'd played around with it enough, doing like blockchain analysis stuff, but not as an operational database. It was always as an
mm.
analytics database. Um, so it's just like, yeah, now I'm just like, and the backups are even like with Lightstream. It's like I've never felt so confident in the backup strategy. And I've used like third-party providers that handle all the backups, and it's like, but they're not to the second. Um, and it's dirt.
Where
It's
is
like
Lightstream backing up the database to? Is it
so
to
it can
an
back up
S3
to
thing?
yeah. So I'm backing up to an S3, but it's Hetzner's X S3
Or a Nats
or
cluster.
Nats, or there's a
It's
bunch of other
object.
options.
So Hetzner Object Store or
Yeah,
something. I forget what it's called.
yeah, which is S3 compatible. They've got like an object
Hmm.
store, which is super
And for
cheap.
those that don't know, basically what Lightstream does is it actually looks at the individual tables that get written in SQLite. So at a page level, it's basically updating those. So whenever you do a transaction, it actually like intercepts what was changed and takes those tables and pits it up directly. So instead of doing like a per transaction, you're actually doing it at the page level. So it can be really like efficient with it, and it can do it in like sub-second, and it costs almost nothing to run.
Yeah, it's like literally the operational piece that is like SQLite is fantastic operationally because you just don't have to do anything. It's just a file. I mean, run vacuum now and then, compared to Postgres. But with Lightstream, it becomes like, well, that was the one thing I was worried about backups. And you can replicate to multiple different sources, right? It's just,
The other thing that's really valuable in that for anyone that's kind of exploring this stuff, the thing that's interesting about Lightstream is you can also, so you can be sending up a backup of your thing to S3, but you can also have someone else get a read-only version of that down so that they can just be listening. And now all of a sudden you can do projection for basically free. So even if
yeah.
you're
And
doing an
I
event
think
sourcing,
the latest version has some really nice replication features as well, that they've added, and NAT support as well.
And something that we teased out last time, which is some Datastar merch. I have it pretty much ready. In fact, I've soft launched it, and by the time this goes out, it might actually be live. So you may be able to get your merch. Delaney, you're wearing the Rocket tee. I'm wearing the Framework tee,
cool.
which is available in some really nice colors. So I want to get merch in people's hands if they want it. It's really I like a nice T-shirt, and I'm always running out of T-shirts, so it's fun. Cool, Anders. What's next for you before we wrap this up? Are you like just chugging along with work and your demos, or do you have
Yeah, I
something
mean,
else that you'd like
I've got a
to?
second baby due in 2 weeks, so
That
that's what's next for
there's
me.
your project. Okay.
You'll see a lot less of
No,
me on Discord.
he already has a second baby. It's called Delaney's like pet language that he made.
Oh yeah,
And he has to spend all of his time working on that. I literally made a language for Anders since
and
we've
then
last
this
talked.
is like the second one he's built, and I just don't do anything with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me sad.
No, it's really cool.
Like,
but it's a Lisp, so no one will be interested.
it is accurate. But yeah, no, congratulations on the baby along the way. In fact, there's quite a few babies in the community that I've heard about lately. So, like, congratulations. We will see you in a few years. Like, but also, I do want to mention, like, there's a good chance that some of the stuff you've been working on might actually come up at Talk here in a little bit.
So the two of the people I'm working with, David Nolan and David Yang, are doing talks in the Closure Conj. I can't remember the titles off the top of my head. One of them is like a comparison of like our original architecture, which was sync based, and then the move to the new sort of DataStar streaming HTML approach. And the other talk is like more of a general like, where's the web going? Morph, web components, light DOM type chat. So yeah, it'll be really cool to see what those are about. Yeah, it's in the US, and I think it's November the 12th or 13th.
Oh,
it's like the biggest Closure conference, annual Closure
it's
conference.
In South Carolina, if I remember right, or North Carolina.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Anders, for joining us, and good luck with the new baby, and hope to see you again on the show.
Great. Thanks for having me, guys. See ya.